Coming up on Human Services Forum, hear the results from a recent study of domestic violence turned fatal. And preventing child abuse and neglect is everyone's responsibility. Find out how we can all make a difference on Human Services Forum, which is beginning right now. Hello and welcome to the Forum. I'm Jan Callahan. The Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team was formed in 2003 to take a look at the causes and the gaps in services related to domestic violence that does turn into a fatality. The team members have come up with their report, and we're here to talk a little bit about their conclusions, some of the suggestions, and what they learned about their review. With me, I do have Linda Bryant, who is a Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney with the City of Norfolk, and Linda Nimmersheim, who is with an organization called SAFE, and I will let you say what that means, Linda. I appreciate both of you coming on board. This is a very serious subject. We often in the news will hear about those very things, the spouses, the intimate partners, some family members who may die at the hands of another family member. And this is not something that doesn't happen often. It happens frequently. But my understanding is that this review took into to consideration a certain span of time.
That's right.
So that you had all the information you could possibly need in order to make a relevant review. What would you say is really the ultimate finding in this, if you were to say what came out of this review?
I think the ultimate finding, and I think it's surprising to some, is that in 13 out of the 18 fatalities, the deaths that we reviewed, a big factor in that death was the delay on the part of the victim or the perpetrator to seek some type of service that they need, be it substance abuse, mental health issues, and a whole host of others. So that was really the most interesting finding, and I think we both would agree, Linda and I would both agree, that there are a lot of services in the area for victims of domestic violence. It's a matter of reaching out, and that can be hard to do sometimes. Yes. And so there's something that we're working on to try to address that. And maybe we can talk about that now, or
okay, absolutely, because if that's something that people don't reach out, and there are reasons, and you think there might be ways to remove some of those barriers, by all means, this is something I think would benefit everyone.
Well, so that was probably what we consider one of our top 4 contributors, was the delay on the part of the victim or the perpetrator to seek services, and mainly we're talking about the victim. One of the recommendations that came from that was for the shelter advocates, the victim advocates, our office, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and the police department to try to work together to create a more pragmatic and to create an effective risk assessment protocol. So interestingly, about a week ago, we just got word that we received a federal award, so to speak, to train a group of trainers to train the police and advocates and basically folks involved in the first response to domestic violence, and how to properly assess the situation to determine if it's a lethal situation. And that'll trigger a certain protocol with the police calling the shelter advocate from the scene. So it's pretty exciting, and that really came directly from our team's findings. The team was formed in 2003. That's when the City Council approved the creation of a team. But it took a couple of years to get all of the right agencies on board, and to have leaders from within those agencies, really be able to commit the time to focus on this. And so we're one of, I think, 15 or 16 cities throughout the state, only a handful of cities have a fatality review. And we've been up and running since 2009. So we reviewed 18 fatalities from 05 to 08, but we started the review process in 09. So we've gotten a lot done with the review and the team. It's pretty exciting.
So that is that time period means that you had everything you needed in order to do that review, because cases that are still they're still open, you certainly cannot take a look at. So
that's right.
You had to weed out that component.
And the reason for that is because people, well, the statute, the Virginia State Code, requires that we review only closed cases. And I'm speculating, but it makes sense that the reason for that is so that we can all have a little bit of distance and look at what our own agency might have done that we could have done better.
Oh, okay.
So I think that could be the reason for requiring only reviewing closed cases.
Okay. This took some time and some thought and a lot of effort. Linda, the report, I know, would probably tell you some things that maybe you already suspected, but maybe confirm some things. But what is it about the findings that you find to be?
Well, what was really good was bringing all the agencies together, so that we could all have a conversation, you know, in one room.
That doesn't happen very often, does it?
No, and it was really good because it was not a criticism of agencies. That was really important. It was looking at the cases and saying, you know, what could we do next time? What can we do in the future to improve so that these fatalities don't happen in the future? Having a conversation, having the networking was really, really important. And then coming up in the end with recommendations and maybe even a new policy, which was really, really important.
Right. And not having that hierarchy to struggle through to get that conversation going must have been really valuable.
It was really helpful, and maybe not even the well, it was helpful. It's always helpful to have the decision maker there, but also having the actual person who was involved in that particular case was really good.
So you're saying that the person that may have been assigned that case, or
the detective, or the person from social services, the person at the shelter who might have worked with that victim, that was really helpful.
So taking a look at all of those pieces from a very different perspective and in a really different way, or a different goal.
And it gave a different perspective from that individual who worked with that family or worked with that victim, you know, because they saw it from their perspective. And then when you put all the agencies together to be able to talk about it from what each person had input, that was really, really good.
Oh, wow. Well, that does sound like it would have changed probably the way you looked at cases and brought up some new ideas, which is part of this whole review too, was when you take a look at each of these cases and say, well, you know, I didn't see it that way before. Perhaps we could have done this differently, or maybe we should explore providing, you know, filling this particular area or gap with
the team making recommendations.
Yeah, that must be nice.
I mean, we really do dissect each fatality from looking at a perpetrator's prior record. Were there any domestic violence calls in the past? If so, what was done? What happened to the case? Why was this person back on the street to be able to do this again? Why was the case possibly dismissed in a different city sometimes? So, you know, we really dissected it, and each agency had to answer for what they did in that particular case, or in the history, I guess, in the victimology, if you will. Each agency that was involved at some point, well, if you were supervising this perpetrator, how did he end up or she end up able to kill someone? So everybody had to answer for their actions and really examine what the agency could have done better. And sometimes, in rare instances, was there nothing that could have been done better? In pretty much every instance, there's something that we can all improve on. And so having all the agencies in one room, you know, the police department, it was vitally important. They're a big part of this. They were there in the room to talk about the case, to present the facts of the case, and you know, and that's not something that I think most police departments are normally willing to do. But you know, they respected the process. They recognized the fact that this was a state code that enabled this to happen. They recognized that City Council approved it, and I think they really recognized the value of it. So getting them in there to be able to talk about the facts of these cases in a confidential setting, I think really helped some of the victim advocate folks understand what the police have to deal with, because a lot of times they'll go to the scene, and the victims, by the time the police get to the scene, they, for whatever reason, they're not telling the police what happened. So another thing that's come out of this is us listening to more 911 calls and getting access to more 911 calls, which is closer to the truth of what happened a lot of times than when the officer arrives on the scene. By then, often the victim is already starting to change their story.
Right, they're processing it and thinking,
exactly.
What do I want to reveal? And as an advocate, this is certainly...
Yeah, from our perspective, you know, we want to, of course, you know, protect the victim and look out for them and speak for them. But I'll give you another example of something that came out of this that was very important, was the close-knit community, a culture that is very private, that doesn't believe in going to the police, doesn't believe in telling very private things. And we had maybe 3 cases out of the 18 that were very, very private type, you know, keeping things within the family, you know, taking care of things within the family.
Yeah.
And there was very much abuse going on, very much physical abuse going on. But they didn't believe in telling the police. And so that's an area that needs to be have some attention. And so we're looked at, you know, going into their communities, maybe going into their churches, going into their schools, you know, getting to the children, you know, maybe. So that's an area that we were able to recognize by having this review team.
And that's a big area. You know, one of our recommendations was to create targeted outreach and education for socially or culturally isolated communities for whatever reason that they're isolated. And so when the victims aren't telling law enforcement what happened, it could be because they're scared, it could be because that's not part of their culture. There's a whole litany of reasons. And so the new protocol that we received the federal award to implement involves contacting the advocates right away so that they can be part of the talking and the conversation with the victim right away.
Wow, okay.
And then the officer can go on to the next crisis situation and let the advocate sort of take over from that point.
Because we have a different way of approaching the victims, you know, than the officer would.
Right, and that would bring out a different part of that story in a really significant way. So the award, is wonderful to have that recognition for the hard work, and that you know that you can move forward with some of these.
We're very excited about that.
Recommendations. The team itself, does it stay together, or is it something that was just formed for this particular time?
Well, fortunately, we are running out of death cases to review, so that's a good thing. We decided that we would start reviewing fatalities from 2005, and we've reviewed all of the cases up till 2009. We're about to start our 2010 cases, and we had an average of about 4 per year for 05, 06, 07, and 08. In 09, we had 3 cases to review. In 2010, we have, I have to double check my numbers, but I think we only have 2. Okay. And 2011, we have 1. So we're catching up, and we're not having any more. You know what? I'm not even going to say it because I don't want to.
Yes.
I don't want to jinx it, and you know, we'll just have to see.
Oh, great. Well, it sounds like you've got, you know, a really good thing going, and a lot of it makes perfect sense, but you don't know until you start communicating exactly what to talk about sometimes. There's also access to the report if you want to go online. We've put that up on the screen a couple of times to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. It's norfolk.gov/COMMATTY, and you can get a copy of that executive summary and report if you're interested in looking into some of the details. We just couldn't get into all of them right now. Thanks so much for sharing what your experience has been and some of the outcomes, and congratulations on the acknowledgement and the recognition. It looks like that's only going to portend good things to come.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, well, don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to be talking to some advocates for children. Prevent Child Abuse Month is coming up in April, and there are some very, very good information for parents and the community alike. So don't go away.
Have you heard? The U.S. Treasury is phasing out paper checks for Social Security, VA, and other federal benefit payments and going electronic. If you currently receive federal benefits by paper check, you will need to switch to direct deposit or to the Treasury recommended Direct Express Debit MasterCard. If you plan to apply for federal benefits soon, you'll want to decide which electronic payment option is right for you. Visit godirect.org to learn more or to make the switch today.
Welcome back to the forum. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, something we hear about every year. But during that month, there are a lot of activities, events, and a lot of information that's going out to the public to educate us on what the symptoms or signals or signs may be of child abuse and neglect, and what someone can do to perhaps get or interfere with that happening again or reporting. And we had just been talking about domestic violence and fatalities in domestic violence. There really is an overlap. They're very much connected. So we brought Linda Bryant back on with us. She's the Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney for the City of Norfolk. And also joining her is Dr. Michelle Clayton, and she is with the Child Abuse Program with Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters. She's also President-elect for Prevent Child Abuse Hampton Roads, so she is, both of these women have a wealth of information because they deal with it from the legal perspective, the medical perspective, and now, of course, the educational and outreach perspective. So I welcome you both to the show. And Dr. Clayton, your knowledge certainly of children, their development, and how trauma can impact a child is extensive, and I think that our public doesn't always realize just what it is that they can do, even unknowingly, but if they are doing it knowingly, just how damaging things can be, and in some way abusing a child or maltreating a child. We can start with the physical, since that is the most evident to the naked eye. So what is it that you see as an MD and involved in the programs you're in that is most prevalent with children who might be labeled as abused?
We probably see the largest amount of sexual abuse compared with physical abuse being a fairly distant second, and neglect being what we see the least often. However, it's a little bit different from what you see in the Department of Social Services statistics, because the DSS statistics show that neglect is by far the #1 thing that gets called in, either by family members, by schools, or by medical professionals, with physical abuse being a distant second, sexual abuse second to that, and various types of neglect being various types of other abuse, such as emotional or mental abuse, being a rather distant fourth.
But does that have more to do with people being willing to report things or having the ability to report?
I think there's a combination of multiple things that are happening with regard to emotional or mental abuse. It's very difficult for people to first know what it is, and second, it's much more difficult for an agency to prove. And so, and when you look at, say, neglect, that's much easier to see. It's much easier for someone to see evidence of, such as a child being inappropriately dressed for the weather, having clothes that are too small, not having enough to eat, being exposed to various types of weather that they shouldn't be exposed to, you know, not having adequate shelter, not having adequate food. Those things are fairly easy to see, even from the outside. But then when it comes to physical abuse, if a child has unexplained injuries or injuries that don't make sense with the explanation that you're receiving for it, if they have multiple and repetitive injuries over time, you know, that's still something that a person can see. And so when people see signs of abuse or have concerns for abuse or neglect, they most certainly should call that in. A lot of people have the misperception that you have to have proof that abuse or neglect is happening. And that misperception can actually endanger children, because there are agencies that are designed to prove whether or not abuse is taking place, specifically Child Protective Services or police. And so people shouldn't be held back by feeling that they must prove that something unusual is going on.
Well, that's a really good point, because people will hold back and say, you know, or they have to be identified, or there are a lot of fears from people who don't want to get involved because they feel like they're going to get sucked into something that they just don't know that they can handle, but it's the child who is at stake. In the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, certainly you encounter this on a regular basis.
We do, and I would echo what Dr. Clayton says about not being able to see the abuse. Some of the most difficult cases are the abusive head trauma cases, where all the injury goes on inside the head, and we used to call it shaken baby syndrome, and now I guess the medically correct term now is abusive head trauma, because that damage can happen all sorts of ways. But Dr. Clayton and I have both worked cases where the baby's died, and the baby, at autopsy, you can see all of these healing injuries to the baby's brain. And you know, the problem is when babies are small, you know, they don't do a whole lot. And so an 8-week-old infant may have suffered brain injuries, but people can't really tell because the infant can't say, I'm hurt inside. And so it's really important for family members, neighbors. Again, you know, we've talked before about people getting involved. You know, if a child is maybe at 2 months old and not able to follow a gaze, I mean, that's something to, these little things are important, is maybe the bottom line. And if there's something abnormal about how a child's acting, if the child seems overly lethargic, if there's no like muscle reflex, they can't grip a finger at two months old, there might be some issues. And so it's really important when they're small for people, friends, people that care about this child to just take note of the little things. So,
which is all the more important to do the outreach and to get people to be aware of what it is,
Right.
whether it's your child or somebody else's, just to know what the facts are and what to look for, and how to at least go to someplace for somebody to help them.
Right,
If
right.
they can't themselves, clearly they are the conduit.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, and that really is a very key point that we're bringing up again, that children don't know to call the Child Protective Services hotline. They don't know to call the police. And it's up to the grown-ups who are around them who have a concern to make that step, to take that step and make the call.
What's interesting here too is, you know, we talked about earlier about domestic violence. You know, it's really, when we're talking about abuse, we're talking about where, in many instances, where a parent's frustration turns into anger and then goes into rage. And so if people know somebody that doesn't handle stress very well and that gets angry, be concerned about the child that's left in that person's custody, because that's when bad things happen.
And we have seen this time and time
Yeah.
again too, with
Right.
quite a few children who have in the region anyway. I don't know if this is mirrored nationwide, but certainly in this area,
Right.
that have met you know, a really awful fate because of somebody's temper.
And now, sadly, you know, it can be where somebody's playing a video game and they're addicted, and the child is crying, and the person playing the game gets distracted. They're upset because they can't focus on whatever it is they want to focus on, their game, their project, whatever it is, and they will, you know, through whatever the motive is, we don't need to talk about, but by shaking the child, they're essentially shaking the child into silence. And sure, the babies quit crying, but at what cost?
Right.
Which I know you could address, because that is part of, you know, what you do.
Absolutely,
And
yes.
it can be incredibly damaging.
Yes, indeed. And it's when we talk about the situations that are dangerous for kids, certainly, as Ms. Bryant pointed out, it doesn't make sense for a child to be left with someone who doesn't particularly like kids, has outbursts of temper, or has lashes out in rage against people, because of course the children are at risk when they're in a situation like that. But when you think about how difficult it is, even for wealthier families, to find affordable, high-quality child care, you know, then the dilemma of a lower-income family becomes very critical, because they might have to rely on friends or other family members to watch their child while they go to work. There might be long waiting lists for child care, and even if they can get their child into child care, there are many families who can't afford it unless they do have assistance from the Department of Social Services.
Yeah, or they may have more than one caregiver that steps in and
Yes.
helps them, and
Right.
and so it dilutes a little bit maybe the assurance that you have
Right.
need
Right.
for your child.
Right. I mean, we seem to do pretty well with grandma caretakers.
Yes.
They seem to be kind of okay.
Right,
It's-
right. More
it's
patient and
really it's-
nurturing.
I guess if there's a common demographic, so to speak, it's the younger, you know, it's the younger perpetrator that just isn't quite emotionally equipped, just doesn't have the emotional resources or the financial resources to deal with high stress situations. So that's sort of the type, the tip. If there is a typical person, I mean, I hate to even say there's a typical person, because there's
Right.
not.
Because it
But
can
just
be
losing
anyone.
your cool, and because maybe that's either worked in the past in other situations, or nobody has ever said, don't do that.
Right,
Right.
right.
Well, in the case of when you have a child's life, you know,
Right.
as your responsibility, it can be a completely different thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Dr. Starling, the medical director at the Child Abuse Program, had actually done one of the first studies looking at who commits these kinds of crimes against children, specifically looking at the instance of abusive head trauma or shaken baby syndrome. And she found that fathers were the #1 perpetrator of shaking little kids, with mother's boyfriend being a very close second.
And you do often hear about that.
Yes, you sure do.
You really do.
Yes.
So that sort of confirms what might be already
Right.
supposed by a lot of people.
Right.
So, you know, it is. It's quite a conundrum when you don't really have the money to do or get whom you need,
Right.
but you still rely on somebody to do it. Is there a solution?
I think this, you know, education, and I think, you know, we tend to think of child abusers as monsters, but I think what we both found is that it's really not about who a person has been in their life. It's an act that they commit. I mean, we recently, the Child Abuse Program also helped us with a case involving a sailor that had done everything right, grew up, was the homecoming king from his hometown, and joined the Navy and really was committed to a good future. He'd been on several deployments. The baby was 8 weeks old, and by the time, each time he would come back, he'd have to go on a training, not deployments, but training exercises. He'd come back for a couple days, then go back out. So on the instance when the baby died, was he told the child's mother, you know, I will stay home, and you go and have a good time. And again, you know, he hadn't had the time to really bond with the child, and when the baby would cry, he would give the child to the mother. And so when he's alone, you know, so a lot of it is not to excuse the conduct, because he was prosecuted and convicted, but we have to look at this education component that's essential to prevention. And I mean, we have got to talk about it as much as we can so people understand, you know, particularly abusive head trauma. That's sort of my big thing. A conference that I was at with Dr. Starling in January, I think was geared towards pediatricians and more the general practitioner versus the child abuse pediatrician. And it was amazing how much even the general medical community didn't quite understand that people can do this. There was, you know, the pediatric community, they want to help people. And so I said that when I spoke with Dr. Starling. I said, you know, y'all want to help people, but we have to look at this, you know, and think maybe parents do this, and they do inflict abuse. So that's, education's key.
Right. Well, it's a very important topic, and hopefully there'll be a lot more said during the month of April and every month of the year about child abuse prevention. Thanks for sharing your perspectives. We've run out of time.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us. Bye, guys.